Joining me today from Washington, D.C. is U.S. Senator Ben Sasse. Senator, welcome to the Nebraska Family Alliance daily radio program.
Thank you, Karen. It's good to be home.
Well, we always love hearing from you, and you've got some good news to share with our listeners. You and three of your colleagues introduced the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act.
Yeah, this is exciting news. The House of Representatives last week actually passed the Pain-Capable bill, also known as Micah's Law, named for a little kid who was born at 20 weeks and is now a healthy, thriving, spunky kid. And you see what can happen when people get the kind of love and medical care they deserve at 20 weeks. And what we're trying to do, and Lindsey Graham and Joni Ernst and I and a few others have introduced in the Senate the companion bill to this piece of legislation that passed the House. If we could pass it in the Senate as well, it would go to the president's desk, and he has said that he would sign it. It's a piece of legislation that tries to recognize that at 20 weeks, a baby in mom's tummy, she can hear and she can see, and we have scientific evidence that she recoils from surgical instruments when they come at her at 20 weeks. There's clear evidence that she's capable of feeling pain, and we should be protecting that life. Obviously, I, like you, Karen, and like the vast majority of your listeners, are pro-life beginning to end. But for a lot of our neighbors who may not be as pro-life as we are, it turns out when they see this evidence and this information about the fact that at 20 weeks, a baby is capable of feeling pain, they also agree that we should be recognizing the dignity and the worth and the humanity and the personhood of that baby, and we should be protecting them. Again, I believe that life begins long before this moment, but we should be making incremental progress wherever we can, and so it's exciting that the House passed this bill, and it's a privilege to have been able to introduce it in the Senate.
Well, Senator Sasse, medical advancements such as the 3D and 4D ultrasound, they really provide us that evidence of viability. And there is so much research that lets us know that babies do feel pain. I understand that there are only 6 other nations in the world that provide abortion past 20-week viability. What is the chances that we can pass this legislation through the Senate?
Yeah, so let's pause on that point of the other 6 nations that you mentioned. I mean, it is absolutely abhorrent that the U.S. is one of only 7 nations on the earth. There are 200 nations on the globe, and we're one of only 7 nations in the world that allow elective abortions after 20 weeks or after 5 months of gestation. I mean, that means we share a status with North Korea and China, some of the worst human rights offenders on the earth, and we don't belong in that group. And it's clear that our neighbors don't usually know this. So folks don't understand that even though a lot of places in Europe have more liberal sexual mores than we do, they have more conservative abortion laws. And so in the U.S., we are one of these only countries on the earth that don't protect these babies past 20 weeks. And I think that being pro-life means that we're pro-baby, but it also means that we're pro-mom, we're pro-woman, and we're pro-science. And this bill is based on science. It's obviously based on compassion, too, but it recognizes that the scientific evidence tells us that an unborn baby can feel pain. And so I think that one of the things that should move the needle over time among politicians is a recognition that the public is becoming more pro-life on a lot of these issues. So if you listen to the national media, you would think that the younger people are, the more socially liberal they are. If you go from 70 to 50 years old to 30 years old to 15 years old, the assumption is that people are more liberal on social issues. And on some issues, that's true, but it's not true on the life issue. When you go from 50 or 30-year-olds down to 15 or 20-year-olds, you find that people are actually becoming more pro-life because they're seeing all these 3D and 4D images that you mentioned. And when they see these pictures of a baby in utero, it's just so obvious that she's a baby and that she needs love and she needs protection. And so we need to advance this legislation. Now, what are the prospects for its passage? I mean, the truth of the matter is almost all Republicans are there, but not every Republican, and almost no Democrats are in the right place on this issue. And it's a real tragedy. I'm the third most conservative person in the Senate by voting record, but I would like it if both parties were advancing a healthy vision for the country. I don't just want the parties to compete. I want them to ultimately agree on really important stuff. And so I think it's a tragedy that pro-life Democrats are so unrepresented in the American Congress, where you have pro-life evangelical Democrats in Nebraska. You have pro-life Catholic Democrats in Nebraska, and yet you have basically no pro-life Democratic candidates left because national Democratic organizations come in and try to snuff them out in primaries. And so the math of trying to get this bill passed, usually it takes 60 votes to get anything done in the U.S. Senate, and we only have 52 Republicans, and we're probably 2 or 3 Republicans short of those 53 in being willing to vote for the bill today. But I think we should be voting on this to smoke people out and to have them have to demonstrate why would they stand against science? Why would they stand against compassion? Why would they stand against the 3D and 4D images that you mentioned? There are Democrats from states like Indiana and North Dakota and Montana in the U.S. Senate where lots of their population is pro-life. And a lot of these senators should be put on record to have to explain why would they not want to defend the life of these babies that so obviously can feel pain. So I think we're going to make progress over time if we get some votes on it, because I think the public is in a healthier place than the elected officials.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I was thrilled to see that a female senator, Senator Joni Ernst, is one of the co-sponsors. And I'm hoping that some of our female representatives can speak to some of the Republican representatives and try and change hearts and minds, because that's what this discussion is about. And as you were talking about the millennial generation, there is a movement. They are engaged on this issue. They let science speak to them, and they see this not only as a viability for life, but also for compassion for women, providing them life-affirming options.
Yeah, well said. I just think that the culture of life point you make is a point that you and I have, heard lots of people say with tears in their eyes on cold January days, tears in their eyes because of love and compassion for moms and babies, not just because it's frigid in Nebraska in January at March for Life days. But when we're at the steps of the Unicam roll, one of the things that you hear so many people saying, and so many young women, maybe of people who've had abortions and now have the ache and the regret of that, what you hear them saying is, hey, this isn't first and foremost about legislation. I believe in passing this legislation, but first and foremost, this is about getting people to pause and reconsider human dignity. This is about pausing and trying to celebrate and recognize the dignity of the gift of being an image bearer of God, which is what each of these little babies are. And we can do better than we're doing right now. And that includes bringing this bill for a vote and trying to get it to the president's desk for a signature. But it also includes just standing with babies and celebrating moms and letting them cry on your shoulder about some of the stuff that when you say, hey, if you're trying to bring your baby to term and he or she is 20 weeks along in gestation and you find a medical problem with them and the doctor's going in to do surgery in utero, we give them anesthesia now. Why do we do that? We do that because we know that these babies feel pain, that they're alive and that their nerves are sensitive and they recoil from those surgical instruments and from that pain. Well, how can we not be providing protection for these most vulnerable among us? We can and we must do better. That includes legislation, but it also includes the civility of love and persuasion. So thanks for what you fight for, Karen.
Well, thank you, Senator Sasse. And Nebraska Family Alliance worked diligently to pass such legislation at the state level, and we want to see it at the federal level. We applaud you for working diligently to change hearts and minds, because every baby deserves the chance of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness.
Amen.
Thank you, Senator Sasse. God bless you for your work.